Greetings, programs. My name is Clint Hoagland, and this is Creating Electronic Music with ChucK. In our last tutorial, we talked about how to use if statements to make a custom drum machine. In that tutorial, we ran into a problem that has probably occurred to you a couple of times by this point. Is there a good way to play more than one thing at a time? Let me illustrate the problem. Here I have a ChucK program that plays an arpeggiated chord. And here's a ChucK program that plays a kick drum pattern. Let's say that you wanted to sync these two things together and have the kick drum play at the same time as the arpeggio. Right away you're going to encounter a problem. Both of these patterns have their own moment at which they chuck a duration into now. You can play them back to back, but there's no obvious way to play them back simultaneously. One thing you could do is you could rewrite your ChucK in such a way that all of these musical events are mixed together. You set up all the musical events that need to happen as a group and then chuck time into now and they all play and then you do it all again. But that kind of sucks because before, our arpeggio was this nice little for loop and our drum pattern was this easy to read little score. Mixing these patterns together would make it all really hard to read, and it would be hard to change things without thinking really hard about the bookkeeping that's going on into what time is happening where. Fortunately, ChucK provides a solution to this problem in the form of shreds. If you think way back to the beginning of this series when we started out playing our ChucK files from the MiniAudicle, and that in the MiniAudicle, the way you start playing something is to press Add Shred. At that time, I said don't worry about what a shred is because we'd get to it, and today is the day. Let's talk about shreds. The simplest way to define a shred is the way they describe it in the ChucK book, which is, a shred is a single ChucK process, a strand of sequential code. Up until now, we've been running all of our ChucK programs in a single shred, which is to say that we've only been running one ChucK process at a time. But you can actually run more than one shred at a time, and there are three ways to do it. They are adding shreds to and removing shreds from the virtual machine using the MiniAudicle, sporking shreds from within a ChucK program, and adding files to the virtual machine from within a ChucK program. Let's talk about these options in order of complexity, starting with the simplest one. Let's bring up the MiniAudicle. In this MiniAudicle window, I've got what you can hopefully recognize by now as a simple little loop. I've got an oscillator that goes into an envelope, which then goes into a pan 2, which goes to the DAC. And I've defined a couple of initial values for some things in a way that you've seen multiple times before, no surprises there. And then I just have a very simple infinite loop. 19 lines of code, including 3 lines of white space. It sounds like this. Now let's direct our attention to the virtual machine window in MiniAudicle and also keep another eye on the console window. As you can see, we can see in the virtual machine window that a shred appears when we add it and then it goes away when we remove it. However, there's actually no reason why you have to stop the first shred before adding another one. In fact, unlike in VS Code or other text editors, the MiniAudicle actually runs the text in the text editor and not the file that's saved on disk. This means you can change something about your ChucK file and add it as a new shred without saving. Allow me to demonstrate. Okay, I'm going to start the first shred. And then I can make a change and add a second shred. Let's add another one. And we can take them out of here by clicking this little minus button. Set that back on there, but let's just make it 0.5. Let's make one that goes twice as fast. And we could replace the shred instead. Let's make that right at the center. So as you can see, you can build up a complex texture by adding multiple shreds of the same ChucK file to your VM. Here's a slightly tweaked version of the file I made during the reverbs tutorial. Let's play around a little bit. So, if you're going to be playing ambient music where the timing is not super important, this is a great and simple way to perform with ChucK. Get a basic shred going, tweak it, add another shred, keep going for as long as you want. The only downside of this is that you don't have much control over the timing of the shreds. To go back to our original problem, we wanted to play our arpeggio and our kick pattern at the same time. This would not go well adding shreds in the MiniAudicle. Instead, for that, we can use the spork keyword to spork a function. Sporking a function launches that function on a new shred. That new shred is a child of the shred that you sporked it from, and parent shreds are synced together with child shreds on a sample-accurate schedule. The time that gets chucked to now in a child shred only moves forward when the parent shred also moves forward by chucking time into now there. When the parent shred stops, the child shreds also stop. Let's copy and paste our kick file into our arpeggio file and wrap their respective while loops into functions. We'll call them goArp and goKick. Now let's spork the goArp function. We have to send time afterward in the parent function so that it will proceed. Okay, now let's spork the goKick function. Now let's spork them both. So what happened there was we sporked two shreds off of the parent shred. They both kept track of their own timing, which they kept in sync with the parent shred. When the parent shred stopped after 4 beats, the child shreds also stopped, even though they are infinite loops. Let's try it one more time. What we saw here was that you can spork functions at different times and they will start and sync up with the parent shred, which is correspondingly syncing up the other child shreds. There's a ton more we can do with sporking because it's super useful to have multiple things happening at the same time. But this video is already getting long, so let's save those for next time and quickly cover adding files to the virtual machine. I undid the changes to arpeggio.ck, and now let's make a new file. I'll call it machine.ck. In here, let's build up a path to kick.ck by adding its file name to me.dir in the same way we did with the sound buffer. We stashed that in a string called kick file name. If we type in machine.add and then give it that string, it starts our file on a new shred. Note, this is not a child shred. It will continue on its own until you stop it. Note that my ChucK file has 4 beats, but this thing just keeps going. Here's how you stop it. The machine.add function returns an ID for the shred running the file. Chuck that into an int with an ID, and then you can use machine.remove to kill the shred. You can also use machine.replace with the shred ID and a different file name to use that same shred ID with a different file. This is very useful for mixing and matching different files together and creating a sort of score for your ChucK files. The machine functions also open ChucK to the possibility of live coding. Okay, that was quite a fire hose, but don't worry, we will continue to explore these concepts in further tutorials. In this tutorial, we introduced shreds, which lets you play more than one thing at a time, and talked about 3 different ways to launch them. In our next tutorial, we'll talk about filters.